So the title of the article is Transmission in Sri Ramchandra's Raj Yoga, speech delivered on 3 Sir TB Road, Allahabad on 8th April 1968. I am profoundly grateful for this opportunity to speak to you on the great work which Babuji is carrying on in this world. His present work is to disseminate the practice called Sri Ramchandra's Raj Yoga, so that not only we who are citizens of India, but the whole world may profit by the spiritual work. Ultimately, the aim is to have a new type of people who might be called divine, who live the life of God on earth and make the world a better place and happier place to live in. For this purpose, he has propounded a system of yoga or divine connection or union, which would moderate the influences in this universe and normalize our lives. We are living in extraordinary times, and the world is seething with tensions of all sorts, which are results of great upheavals in the field of politics, of racial relations, of communal relations, of familial relations, and also individual relations. In the fields of industry and in the fields of art, you have the same confusion and tension, and there have been many misinterpretations of innovations which are considered to be creations, indeed very perverse, many of them. And that is why we are not able to distinguish between the true and the false, the beautiful and the ugly, the good and the bad. And in this great confusion, we are trying to create more tensions by emphasizing differences rather than unities. The struggle for unity, again, has not been well conceived. Unless the mind of man changes and his personality is transformed to become harmonious and integrated in the real sense of the term, that is to say, integrated from above rather than integrated from below, we are bound to experience more shocks. It is in this context that Sri Ramchandra's Raj Yoga demands our earnest and urgent consideration. Sri Ramchandra's Raj Yoga is in one sense the ideal towards which all yogas have striven but have missed. We all know that there have been several kinds of yoga, and Raj Yoga is also considered to be one of them. We start with Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga, and we consider that these are practicable to all of us. However, we know that the sannyasis have a claim for Jnana Yoga. Bhakti Yoga is intended for people who are uneducated, and Karma Yoga for all and sundry. But in ancient times, Karma Yoga demanded a knowledge of the technique of rituals. Jnana Yoga wanted a competence in certain matters, and Bhakti Yoga also wanted competence in certain other aspects. But thanks to our modern reformulations of ancient yogas by very well-meaning reformists, we have lost the meaning of Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga. Karma Yoga is social work, Jnana Yoga is modern philosophy, and Bhakti Yoga is mere bhajan. Maybe that all this may lead to something good. I do not deny that each one of them has its use in a limited sense. But by and large, many of us have felt that they have become meaningless as ideals to be pursued and coveted. Therefore, we have been searching for a real yoga. But here again, we have met some people who have stated that Raj Yoga propounded and practiced by the sannyasis is an exclusive preserve of sannyasis alone, because Vairagya is demanded as a condition. Giving up of all activities is very necessary. A state of thoughtlessness must be introduced by force and by practice. And all types of disciplines are necessary before you can have union with God. You all know about that other yoga called Hatha Yoga. It is a peculiar and arduous training of the physical body, requiring a tremendous amount of patience and, I should say, forbearance. We therefore found that Hatha Yoga again is unsuitable for the large mass of mankind. I'll just stop here for a few minutes. Now we have
Pranam Sir, Shakti here.
Shakti.
Good morning, all. Sir, here he is basically emphasizing that the state of thoughtlessness must be induced by force and by practice. And uh, what I understand is that we have to be at certain point in time during meditations unmindful of these thoughts. So I'm not able to correlate both of these. That if we are doing force, then it is concentration.
No. He is giving you a background of all the systems available in India at that time in 1968. So people who were practicing Raj Yoga they were all sannyasis who have renounced, who insisted on Vairagya. And they were insisting on thoughtlessness by force or by drugs or by practice. So he's just stating the current situation at that time, and then he will now come to the actual system which Babuji is teaching. So it is just a background he's giving for his talk actually. But this was insisted upon by the sannyasis at that time who were purported to teach Raj Yoga to people. They were insisting on Vairagya and they were insisting on thoughtlessness by practice or by force. They used to heavily they used to use bhang and all that to go into kind of a senselessness and all that. So you just try to understand the context in which he's talking. He's trying to talk about the system to new people. So before introducing the concept of pranahuti, he's trying to give a background information about the state of affairs in the spiritual field in the country at that particular point of time. I hope this is not at all concerned with Ramchandra's Raj Yoga or concerned with Babuji's system. He is just reviewing the state of affairs of what Jnana Yoga means, like that Karma Yoga has become social service, Jnana Yoga has become modern psychology. That's what he's trying to tell you. But this is not our system at all. Now we have tantric systems which have developed several kinds of techniques, occult in some sense, mysterious in another sense, entirely nauseating in a third sense, and revolting also. All this has set intelligent man, the thinking mind, a task of finding out how to connect oneself with God. Much better was it to deny the existence of God himself. But then God cannot be dismissed by merely saying that he does not exist, even if that contention is maintained with the help of proofs drawn from natural history and materialistic sources. We somehow believe that there must be a supreme force which is operating in every one of us, making us live the life. But unfortunately, somehow, for some reason, whatever the reason that man may try to give, the flow of that supreme energy into us or that supreme consciousness into us has got arrested. And we feel as if the sap by which we have been fed is almost running dry. Therefore, we wanted someone to give us the nature and the manner by which that supreme being can be first connected with us. We find in the message and the method given by Babuji that not only is it the most simple thing available to us and ready at hand, it is something that will do the work and the task to which it has been called. Raj Yoga, which he has said is really sovereign yoga, is a yoga where we start our yoga with relation with God rather than wait for it at the end of a long and arduous apprenticeship or discipleship or tapas. Our tapas begins with the help of God, under the guidance of God, under the guidance of the supreme power, which goes on giving us the force and the power and the ability and the capacity to absorb the divine element within us. It may appear strange, but it is a fact that the most distant being and the highest and the ultimate being has been lodged in the very cave of our hearts, or rather can be lodged there. We are yet suffering from the view that God is someone who is afar and apart from the reality or the world. That logician's non-mystic view that God is far beyond us. Man's finite mind cannot grasp it. The Vedic seer was much bigger in this concept than these little logicians of the Nyaya school. So God, if anybody has got questions, please note it down. Towards the end, we'll try to address whatever we know about this thing. So God can be brought into the heart of man. Not only can he be brought, but he is willing to come if you can call him. You can give an opportunity to him, but your idols of the cave and the idols of the tribe and the idols of so many sorts prevent that God from entering your heart. Our conceptions are like walls raised between reality and ourselves. And since you cannot break the walls yourself, somebody has to make holes in the wall that you have created. And that is a function which befalls a teacher of yoga. He has to pierce through your walls of misunderstanding, of obstruction, the sheaths which you have raised between reality and yourself. Well, I do not enter into the discussions or descriptions of how these walls have come, how have ever come between God and us, both from within and from without. The imageries may not help much, but we know that going outward and outward, we do not come across reality. And it is rather difficult to go inward and inward to probe into the depth of reality. Well, these have confronted people and produced all sorts of tensions. And when we can go neither inside nor outside, our concern is with our neighbors against whom we make all complaints and spend our whole lifetime in beating each other and quarreling with each other. In fact, we are indulging in a very senseless play because we have no other place to go towards. That is why the confusion today is we have not been able to go either upward or inward or even outward properly. All our knowledge of the world has not opened us up. All the scriptural literatures have not helped us. They somewhere show a dim, far-off glance of an infinite beyond, but of its possibility here and now, we have hardly any. That is the reason why this Raj Yoga was propounded by Sri Babuji. For him, as I said, the easiest thing is to get the highest consciousness into you. I almost venture to think that this is the bringing of God into his home in the heart of man. And this is done in a simple way, taking the old system of trying to bring the ultimate manas, the first thing that is brought out in the creation in its nascent form, and introducing it into the heart of the little blindfolded and severely ensheathed mind of man, and it can do the job well. And when that supreme mind, the mind of God, of course, God himself might have no mind, but he uses the mind in his creation, and that mind finds its affinity with the mind within us, of which it is a product. When that supreme mind is introduced into the heart, this little mind joining with it enjoys a peculiar sense of release of tensions. A kind of unsheathing of the sheaths seems to happen, a penetrating beyond the walls that have been raised by you, so that it can flow out and flow within. So tensions are removed at once, and man has a gaze of the infinite, which he pursues afterwards with tremendous devotion. The beginning of the highest consciousness of mind into the heart of every individual is done by a special process, which was at one stage common knowledge to all the great men, but which has since been forgotten. It has to be brought back. And now it has to be brought back under circumstances which are quite different from those ages. And for this purpose, Babuji has devised or invented a method by which it could be introduced with the least amount of sophistication, the least amount of knowledge on your part, or even faith, as he puts it, or any duty or work that you have to do in the sense of a ritual or rite. It is done simply by merely sitting before the master. And the process by which it is done by him is called transmission. Once this transmission takes place, the mind within opens up towards this new frontier. Calmness settles on it. Harmony seems to develop between himself and his members. And afterwards, he finds it developing in larger sphere. Even natural events and oppositions yield to this new force introduced into the heart. This is the power of transmission which Sri Ramchandraji, Babuji, has perfected and has been using on all types and grades of people, intellectuals, non-intellectuals, learned men, ignorant men, the rich and the poor, without any difference whatsoever. And the results have been, from my experience for the last 12 years, uniformly of the same order, the detensioning of man. It is not that you will see God face to face, as some might say. There are no visions offered, and there is no need for visions in this marga. Experience is not vision. Vision is only one type of experience. Experience is much deeper in the heart, and a peculiar kind of activity of harmonized existence comes. It may not be very sudden. It is not expected to be sudden. It has to become natural, so that your body might become accustomed to this new dynamism and this new movement which has taken place thanks to this transmission. This is the unique thing found in this system and which is not found in any other. If they had, they have forgotten it. And the Raja Yogins who have been writing all these books and translating Patanjali's Yoga Sutras again and again, most learned men, and commented on them also, missed the most important thing, namely that you cannot control your mind with your efforts. You can only control your mind by creating more tensions. By the ordinary textbook method of Raja Yoga, without transmission, you can only create tensions. And as Sri Krishna said, it requires quite a large amount of abhyasa, vyavasaya, cultivation and culturing, or ploughing, shall I say, before you can bring the mind under check. But checking the mind is not our goal. It is only the means. And Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha doesn't at all give the full definition. The real thing is, if you connect yourself with God, then everything will follow from it. So first let me be connected with God, with that ultimate force, which is called by Babuji Pranahuti, or transmission. The offering of the very breath of Brahman into you. It is the manas that has become prana, as the Upanishad puts it. And it is by that you are all living. But the prana with which you are all living has become so enfeebled, so much so that you would like to give up this type of prana even. How to give new life to you. You have to get it from the source again. And he is certainly a God who can bring that source back into my heart. To re-enliven one, make one feel a new man with a new life and a new possibility for mankind. That is the reason why this Pranahuti principle of transmission is very important. If you have all the other things with you and not this, they are like dead things with you. Instruments which have no meaning, methods which have no value. And if you have this, all of them get built up. And you find everything makes for your harmonization and integration. This Pranahuti, many of us think that this Pranahuti is merely the offering of Argya into the fire, the ghee into the fire. And in our eating, we always feed the 5 pranas with some food and call it Pranahuti. But what is it that you're offering into this fire of the heart, which is fire of greater life and an immortal one? I believe God himself offers his very breath into us, that is, his mind, which is resting in peace, which is unfathomable and which cannot be broken by any amount of confusion. That is what is fed into us. You may call it the sacrifice of the Purusha in the language of the ancient Veda. The supreme consciousness is offered into you, and this we call the supreme thought, the supreme mind. And when that is introduced, our yoga starts. The others are preliminaries, and as Master has, I think, written somewhere, the real initiation comes long afterwards when the connection between you and ultimate is established. I have suggested in a way that the very touch of the Master's life force into one is the beginning of a yoga that will not terminate till the final complete yoga is had. We start with yoga, we culminate in identity, in union. Such a sayujya is beyond any description, but we start with it. We grow more and more with it. All the sadhanas become natural to us. The so-called yama and niyama are naturally established in our system because they are basic elements and characters of the ultimate consciousness which has come to dwell within us, which has come to operate on our very urge. Our organism is not something repellent, something karmically determined by blindness and darkness and ignorance. An omniscient, omnipotent force such as the prana of the divine, the supreme mind, the supreme thought, when it enters into our whole being, every one of the several parts of our body and mind get new force, new direction. They become truthful. They yearn for the infinite Brahman. They neither steal nor rob, nor cause injury. Their cleanliness is natural to them. Their devotion to reality is perfect, and God almost dwells in them because they have surrendered willingly, freely, to be molded by the divine light and the divine force. But even that is not something which you are asked to do. It does it quietly, naturally, and maybe it appears fantastic. It appears almost that I am speaking something in an exaggerated language. But I may confess to this that slowly, imperceptibly, many of our abhyasis have changed for the better. And to them, there is no effort to speak the truth. There is no effort to practice brahmacharya, or an effort even to love God, or effort for devotion. Knowledge comes naturally, action comes naturally. We are established in the yoga of jnana and karma and bhakti in a natural way. And all the controls over the several portions of one's body also, I believe, if wanted, come naturally to us. The Sri Ramchandra's Raj Yoga then takes us naturally to this point of a normal evolution of the human being to the most high spiritual stature by developing his moral virtues. Indeed, Sri Ramchandra ji has prescribed in his 10 commandments the practices which might be helpful for bringing about and preserving the force and effort which the divine makes after the pranahuti has been given, or during the period during which it is regularly being given. These commandments are rather instructions which you would like one to practice as a way of cooperation with him, so that one's higher evolution may be made easy and swift. But even these instructions sometimes appear conventional to me, because one naturally becomes resigned to the will of the master, and one does everything as if effortlessly. Occasions for one's choice of events as to how one has to do and how not to do certain things become infrequent. Occasions for going wrong normally do not occur. It seems as it were that the master is looking on all the time, and therefore you feel the omnipervasive presence of the master with you. The divine consciousness and presence will be vouchsafed to you whether you are asleep or awake. It is a phenomenon which I have experienced again and again. That is why I speak with a little amount of pride that it has been possible for me to experience these things which I felt were beyond my reach. Many of the experiences recorded in some of the Upanishads get a confirmation, and you find that the system which our master has propounded is sublime, simple, and very easy to practice by everybody. This is the normal method. The extra normal or artificial methods are where you are asked to practice these things. And even if you practice them for 20 years and 30 years, yet we have got many people who will tell you that they have had false, disillusionment, and so on. I know of so many men who have come away from some other system feeling at the very touch of this system that they have made perfect, that they have been made perfect and pure. So you see that Sri Ramchandra's Raj Yoga, this unique system of simplicity, dependent upon acceptance and trust, as my master would put it, that the divine force which he gives as the breath of your breath and the life of your life and the eye of your eye and the ear of your ear and the mind of your mind can work a transformation of your entire personality, structured as it is and fed as it is on the normal experiences of the world. Such a change is unbelievable. I concede that it is very difficult to believe that such a thing could happen. But if you can believe certain unbelievable things which are not even credible and which you cannot verify, I am not asking too much when I request you to give this a chance to see whether it can transform you. The method is merely to sit before the master and get or ask for his transmission, ask for his pranahuti transmission, and see whether it will not bring a state of peace and calm, a state of self-recollectedness where the thoughts do not fly about meaninglessly, and where you can tolerate the whole world's thoughts, for they do not interfere with the calmness and placidity of your inner being, and where you gradually enter deeper and deeper into the levels of consciousness which have been told by the Upanishads. And the promise given by the Yoga Sutras that you enter into some Prajnata Samadhi, where you are in a non-sensory, non-mental state of thought, which is called Prajna in the Upanishads. And taken bodily by the Yoga Sutra, Samprajnata. And when you go to the Turiya state, still higher, you come to a state where when you transcend the Prajna, Asamprajnata Samadhi. And then that state occurs, you almost enter into what is called the Sahaja Avastha, that is normal to and natural to a person who has got to the highest possibility of release from the Prakritic soul. Then he has gone beyond the Prakriti and the three gunas of the Prajna, and he enters into that Asamprajnata Samadhi, non-mental, non-sensory, non-prakritic state, which is natural to the self, that is the Purusha. And all this is done with the help of the divine force which has come down from above. In this system, then the master, starting with his transmission, takes you gradually, tenderly, and yet very cautiously, step by step, beyond the circle of Maya, beyond the circle of ego, and beyond the circles of splendor to the very central being, which is the natural state which ought to be attained and which can be attained by this process alone. There is no stress on faith. There is only an emphasis on a continuous process of development, evolution, transformation, and finally, perhaps even a transcendence. That supreme transcendent state, which is called the central state, is something which is for the first time rendered possible while yes within the body by the techniques and methods devised or invented by Sri Ramchandraji, our Babuji. That is a very good thing, that with such small beginnings, the greatest thing can be achieved. For we are working with the greatest and the most sovereign principle in creation, the divine mind, which has been brought down thanks to the effort of Babuji in such a way that it can be given or administered into almost everybody, whatever the status of his evolution or in any other system or in any walk of life. We are expected to train ourselves as householders, not as renouncers. Why should we renounce? Just to get this. And if it comes, why should we renounce it? The only renunciation is the renunciation of the will to live in the idols which you have created and worshipped. All that is demanded of you, if anything at all, is a willingness to open yourselves for this great experiment in the divinization of man. It has been tested again and again in the past, and it is in that sense most suited to our modern age, to our modern temperament, to the complexities that have come down to us in such measure as were undreamt of in the past. It has given us a way and a meaning to our lives. And I only pray that this benefit which he has given to some of us and which he is yearning to give to all people will be fruitful and successful. It is something which I feel to be a blessing that has come to us because the transformation of man, the harmonization of man, the birth of an integrated individual, and their continuous birth in our country and elsewhere alone can bring about a transformation in the world crisis and tensions. And man would be fulfilling the goal which he has set within himself of becoming a wise man, but one who yet lives humbly and in holiness, in God, for God, and by God. I do not know if there is anything greater to the living in God, for God, by God. Some have emphasized they can live in God. Many of them have stated they live for God, but who lives by God? And with the very force which God has given to us. And this third thing is most important. We mean to live our lives with the force, with the breath, with the vision, with the audition, with the conscience, which he gives us as men determined to achieve perfection in this world and in the yonder worlds. Fear we have none. There can be no fear in this system. God is not feared but loved. And love, as he puts it, is the pranahuti from him, a self-offering of himself into the fire of your hearts. May you all profit by this great transmission by my master. This is a inspirational talk which should motivate us to sense the fortune which we are all blessed with. But if there are any comments or questions which you feel that which will enrich our understanding about this great system, you can please can talk. This is open for discussion now. Keshav.
I think he very beautifully put everything, what is transformation and transmission is, Pranahuti is, and no misconception about it, and what it can do for you. And he linked the commandments to it very nicely, and they're all natural process if you willingly do it as an experiment. That's what we all started as an experiment, in fact, when we started.
Yes.
And that is in earnest, and it should be with dedication. Then you start seeing the effects of it. And very beautifully given that the karmic and bhakti and all are actually come naturally into you.
One thing to notice, Keshav, he's telling that only thing required is you have to renounce all the idols which you have created. Renounce the idols means notions about caste, about religion, about politics. All those are idols which have created a barrier between us and reality. And you should be willing to renounce those barriers and allow, open your heart to the entry of the master's consciousness into you. And these barriers will not allow you. Suppose you have a caste feeling or a racial feeling or or a class feeling or a feeling that I'm a doctor, I'm a great person. All these are all notions or barriers which have erected. And he says the only requirement he says is you should have the willingness to renounce these barriers and open your heart, allow God to come and do the work for you. He's doing the work. You enjoy life. It is doing the transformation work, and watching the transformation itself is constant remembrance and cooperation. When you sit in meditation, you're enjoying peace, and enjoying peace is the cooperation he's asking you to do. It is such an extraordinarily simple method. It completely bowls you. You just depend on him. With an attitude of yielding, and then just watch the peace entering into your being actually, and then keep on continuing to enjoy peace. And if initial impurities, when they are washed off by the efforts of the trainer and your systematic practice, very quickly you will be getting rid of these gross impurities and you start enjoying real peace. But Keshav, Nuvu Nenu, when we started, within few days we are sitting for hours together in meditation. How is it possible for ordinary people like us to sit in meditation? And I was a obligatory non-vegetarian. I used to eat meat. Without meat, I used to get irritated and angry. And when I was introduced and when I took this meditation, next day the taste for eating meat totally disappeared. I didn't make any effort at all. Afterwards, I didn't eat anything at all. Once, by mistake, I had a piece of fish in some army party, and then I had to vomit it out. And the transformation, I didn't make an effort to transform. The whole thing changed just by the effect of Pranahuti, that's all. It's a revolutionary and amazing system, actually.
And Casey, with his knowledge and his association with religion and everything, he just dropped everything and took up the system. And that's it. He never looked back.
Yes.
And he created this. And therefore, it is coming from his heart. The whole thing as is coming.
Yes.
And that's the way one should have. We should, as you said, renounce that ideas and concepts and everything and just sit in meditation and get the Pranahuti.
All these ideas, like you think that you're a Hindu, you're more advanced, you have scriptures, Hindus brought the scriptures, Vedas, Upanishad, Bhagavad Gita, pure superior than Christians and Muslims. All these are all idols which you have created. You have to get rid of all idols. You cannot be selective in that.
It's all or none. Wholeheartedly you take it or forget about it.
Keshav, the idea, yoga means communion with the object of meditation. Now, when you, now I'm thinking of you, I can, in space and time, I can imagine you in London sitting there. I can see your face also now on the screen. But if you imagine who I am now, you will be aware. You also know, you are conscious of your bodies. Many times you're not conscious of your body, but you feel, you don't even, your awareness will be there, but it is not associated with any idea about space or time also. When you try to know what is the true nature of yourself. And that nature, that is the whole being, which is the core of your being, that has to merge with the object of meditation. Here, the object of meditation is master's consciousness. So yoga means either he has to stay in your place or you have to stay in his place. So if you carry these idols within you, he cannot enter into you. So your idea that if you think that he is a Kayastha person from UP, and then those Kayastha people smoke, drink and eat a lot of meat. I know so many Kayastha people who drink regularly and eat. So how can he be a spiritualist? If you have that idea, even idea that he is of certain caste, that will form an obstruction for me. And the consciousness of the master cannot become friendly with my inner nature. I have to get rid of that. I have to drop all those notions about the object totally. And then only it is possible for it to come. In yoga, either you exist or God exists. So that fundamental concept has to be clearly understood by all. Everybody would have understood within few days of practice. But the whole aim of meditation is to see that your mind resumes its original nature, and the original nature is the same as Babuji's consciousness. That's all. And if you have any notion which is not in harmony with him, you are simply thrown out of that consciousness. Your duality exists. He is separate and you are separate. And whenever there is separation, you can never be happy. You are happy when your happiness, nobody can snatch away your happiness. If anybody can snatch away your happiness, that is not an achievement at all. It should be permanent. And permanence is only possible when you merge into him. So that is yoga. So that is the fundamental idea. We are all moving in that direction. What are the efforts we have to do to purify ourselves so that, yoga becomes possible? That is the effort. That is what practice we have to do.
Shakti here.
Shakti, bolo.
I just noted down few of the questions while you were reading. Pardon me if my questions are not to be asked on a bigger group or a platform. But when you were reading through on page 352, when he talks about our system, he talks about the original mind, the first manas, which is introduced into the aspirant's heart. Now, as per what Pujan Kesanand sir has written in the article notes, he has referred to manas as a simple awareness. So when I relate to that awareness, what is that awareness that is introduced into the aspirant heart? The second question that comes as a fallout is this: is that you all say, and we all know, and we have all read that the God is there in our heart. Then if he is already there, then through this transmission, what is this connection that we are trying to establish?
It is the connection. You asked a good question. The Guru, you see, God is present in our heart, and without his presence, we cannot live. The heart beat stops and then we die.
Right.
So because of his invisible force causing our heart to beat, we are alive. But we are miserable because our mind is like a monkey, and it is so gross with so many imaginations. We imagine that our happiness will be in sensual gratification, so many things, you know, power, prestige, and all those things. That is the thing. So, even though now man finds that all his efforts to get his desires fulfilled in the world are frustrating and resulting in failure, life after life, he is keeping on trying to enjoy more happiness and more pleasures. He finds that all his efforts end in failure, and he goes into depression. During that time, a thought arises that probably I'm going in the wrong direction. Probably I can search for happiness inside me. So then the persons will be attracted to devotion or yoga and all that. So even yoga, for that, it is very extremely difficult for ordinary people to develop direct love for God. It is because it is simply not possible. It's very difficult. You can just imagine like a 90-year-old person with heart failure or with lung problem, corona infection and all that. You ask him to climb Mount Everest and reach the Everest. He simply will give up the effort. But if you bring a helicopter and if the guru comes and says, you sit in this helicopter, I'll take you to the summit, you'll be willing to take it. So the degradation of the mind has become so bad that it has lost all avenues of escape from that prison actually. So the guru comes in and then he removes the obstructions, and then he establishes the connection of the mind with the God inside. And he strengthens it repeatedly by repeated pranahuti. That is the role of the guru. So his mind is as pure as when the mind came out from God for the first time, like the Faksh Shop actually. And that mind actually is capable of establishing your connection of your mind with God. So that is a role performed by any guru actually. And Babaji was an expert in that. I hope I answered your question. Anything else?
Yeah. He says that the source is there and it's become enfeebled, or like we lost touch with it.
Exactly. It's become so like a faint glimmer it has become, and then we have totally become unaware this thing. I was reading one long back, one Sufi story. It was a very interesting idea. I mean, he says, like suppose some people are living in in India, suppose, and then some people, about 1,000 people, have taken a big ship or a boat and then traveled in the ocean, and then they probably traveled about 1,000 kilometers, and they find themselves landing in an island, and then they set up a civilization in that island, and those people are very conscious of the mainland from where they have come. They know the food there, the culture there, the gods, everything. So, but now imagine that people the 1,000 people are living in that island. Now they have lost the boat, or their boat has been damaged, and then it's totally gone. They cannot come back to the island again. So the next generation will be born, and the next generation will be taught about the culture and about the family and all that, about the food habits and gods and all that to the next generation. But slowly, after about 10-15 generations, people will don't know anything about the culture of the mainland. The people will know only about their life in that small island, and nobody knows how to construct a boat. So there is no scope for them to explore and reach back to the mainland. But after about 50 generations, people will totally forget that they originally hailed from the main land itself. Now, if in that community, if somebody then builds up a boat and then embarks on a journey and then reaches back to the homeland, something like that. So then only it is the gurus are great people who actually lead you. Guru means light. They will show you the light in the darkness. So the guru is a person who will, he will show you the way, and then take you carefully, and then place you in the homeland. So that is the thing. So it is very difficult without a guru to reach a homeland successfully. That's like we did a seminar, how if you open your eyes towards the sun, you will become blind. You will turn away from the sun. So you have to close your eyes and walk. We close your eyes and walk, you're scared that you will fall into some valley or something. So if a guru is there, he knows all the way. He can take you, even if you've closed your eyes. You have to trust him, and then he will gradually take you past all those obstructions and ditches and then whatnot, and then take you, because he has traveled that path several times and he knows ins and out of that path actually.
Sir, namaste, sir. Raghavan here.
Raghavan, tell me.
So there is one page number 354 in the first paragraph, end of it. He says, the others are preliminaries, and as master has, I think, written somewhere, the real initiation comes long afterwards when the connection between you and the ultimate is established. So can you elaborate on that?
Initiation means when all your faculties are purified and sense organs are totally disciplined. When faith becomes real, then that initiation comes. From his side, initiation is always there. You have to become pure to get that. This question was raised, and sir has actually asked Babuji. He says, what is this? They are talking of introduction, initiation. What are they talking? They're talking of two kinds of classes of people in Ramchandra mission. One are initiated disciples, one are introduced. What is this? He says, I always introduce you. It is for you to have faith in the master. If you have faith in the master, that happens. Faith means just like the example is of that small child when he's attacked by a tiger, he will rush to the lap of the mother. He will not think whether the mother can protect him from the tiger's attack or not. If he thinks that if he thinks whether mother can, he will not go to the mother. He will try to climb a tree. So that question also will not come in that child. He does not know why he runs to the lap of the mother. You have no reason why you like the master. You cannot explain logically why you like the master. And that is faith actually. When that kind of a faith comes, then, and when your mind and senses and faculties are totally purified, then the first phase of initiation begins, which he talks in the second commandment, then revelations start coming and all that he talks. It is entirely your freedom. Whether you want to have intimate connection with the master, it is up to you.
Introduction is when you are given the first, you are introduced into the system. To get initiated, you get the experience and you live in that condition. And that is what he is talking about. The initiation means. That takes a while for you to get into that. And then there is no question comes whether you are in the system or not system or where you are even. And the connection is firmly established. That is it. That's why Cassian many times he says one of the condition. That is where you are.
The way you have read this, I did read Dr. KCB's articles, but this looks like a poetic description of our system. But he says that in our system, when he says the earlier system, there was a lot of emphasis on developing certain practices. I think that message has to be there, which most of Abhyasis like me forget, is that we have to practice this cultivation of Viveka and Vairagya, because one of the pitfalls, as per the table, in the knot one has a pitfall that it leads to sloth. Also, it leads to basically laziness. And one just cannot rely on being introduced to the system. But there comes a problem with the habits that we have formed over the years in our life. So how can we overcome these habits? These habits don't die in one day. They are not born in one day. So I know the entire abhyas is to cultivate this only. But sometimes with the scenarios around, you as a normal, I will not say human, as an entity, do not have the strength to continue.
अच्छा सुनो, एक बात बोलो, आपको 2 दिन से पानी नहीं मिला, प्यास लग रहा, so you are thirsty and your tongue is parched and dry, and then you're desperately in need of water. Will you ask? You will find your own way to get to the source of water and drink water. आप समझे ना बात को? You know, you will not even ask anybody. You will search yourself. If you are thirsty, will you keep quiet that somebody should come and give? You will yourself search for that water. So it's a question of the thirst you have for the goal. Actually, that is what Babaji in 73 message talks about yearning. आपके अंदर वो भूख लग रहा है, आपको प्यास है तो you will be uncomfortable. Till that thirst is quenched, you will not be able to sit comfortably. So that is each person has to know what he wants in life. That is concerned with the goal clarity. आप मेरी बात समझे कि नहीं कि it depends on the yearning and the thirst or the hunger you have for your goal. That's all. वो प्यास ही ना लगा तो why should you search for God? Suppose you don't have thirst, you don't have hunger, you'll be happy within yourself. People who are searching for peace, who are searching for some problem of dissatisfaction in life, problem of lack of peace in life, the intensity of that suffering actually makes them think about God. It is directly like in yoga, in Patanjali Yoga Sutra, he addresses this question very well. He gives about 9 different, like we have pain score, no, from 1 to 10. Maximum pain is 10, least amount of pain is 1. So in the same sense, the yearning or the restlessness of 9 grades actually. And as per Babaji, if you read Ways and Means, he says if you have pinching impatience and restlessness, which is coming to the grade of 9 or 10, then it takes, yesterday I was reading Practical Pursuit in Silence Speaks. There he says realization of God is a very simple thing. Very quickly you can realize depending upon the yearning which you have. And if it is, your restlessness is there, it can be this very moment you can achieve God. He says you turn your head, but don't turn back, you have achieved God. It is just an understanding. You become, he himself talks about it. दिल का प्यास की बात है ये. The passion which you have, the hunger which you have for missing the company of God is something, is an individual question. That is why if you read any message like the Tinsukia message, he says people are doing meditation and then after the meditation, whatever taught like meditation, evening cleaning, but 9 p.m. prayer, they think that is the thing that is all necessary for success in the spiritual practice. No. You have to cultivate love and devotion. That is the job of the Abhyasi, he says. Unless you cultivate love and devotion, you will not be able to go into the depths of your own being. Actually, we are searching for our true nature. We are trying to search who are we. Like if I'm a doctor, society has given me a certificate that you are a doctor, but real me is something different from doctor. Realm is something we have to find out ourselves. Society gives labels to you, but that is not our real identity. Our real identity is something else, which we have to search for ourselves. Society gives you all wrong names and wrong labels on you, and then you accept that identity, and if that image is hurt and you feel very bad about it, that is not our real nature. Our real nature is something different from the identity which your parents and society has given to you. And unless you know your true identity, you can never be happy in this world. And that is what is called a spiritual journey. You're taking a journey to the depths of your own being, actually. Anything else, Vidyadhar, or kuch?
Oh, one of the things which this article has tried to also talk about is it gives you the direct experience of the divine without having to go through the sadhana which earlier systems one had to go through to even get those experiences.
Yeah.
So that experience or intuition or experience is what is helpful in generating that craving. So that is one of the practical help of Pranahuti.
No, this is a revolutionary help. You know what is the earlier people, they do tapas, like in the earlier cinemas we used to watch mythological movies in Telugu where they spend tapas. That means they'll be doing Ram, like tapas, they'll be doing some ant hills grow about it. For years together, they do tapas. And the ultimate effort is reached, then the God responds, he comes and gives the vision. Just to get the vision. So much of effort is required to just have a glimpse of God. And here, that is the beginning of prayer practice. You are given an experience and then you are asked to say you develop margins with that real nature. You are given a glimpse of your true nature. And then you yourself will practice to see that you merge and achieve it permanent nature. That's what he says. With the natural devotion, the person will practice and then achieve sahijata. That's the word he uses. So the people who have just met Babaji, they have taken up serious practice. The devotion got ignited, and then they could sense extraordinary peace in his presence. And once people know that by true nature your happiness, then who would like to miss that happiness? So this is unique. Whereas in other people, they work very hard, and then afterwards they are given a certificate that you passed the exam and so and so. Here you are given the fruit of the passing of the exam in the beginning, and then you are saying that you now mature in that experience.